The first ship appeared over Mumbai on a Tuesday morning, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight into impossible rainbows across the sky. Within hours, 17 more vessels materialized above major population centers worldwide, sleek, organic-looking, craft that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent veins. Commander Vex Hollander stood in the Pentagon's crisis room, watching satellite feeds of the alien vessels hovering motionless above Earth's cities. The ships were beautiful in their alienness, like living jewels suspended in atmosphere, but their silence was more unnerving than any weapon's roar. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions," reported Lieutenant Kira Valdez, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Multiple languages, but the translation matrices are struggling." The main screen flickered, revealing a figure that defied easy description. Tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between silver and deep blue, the being possessed 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern across its elongated face. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears entirely. "Inhabitants of the third world from your star," the being began, its image wavering slightly through, the transmission static. "I am Nexus Prime Keth Mordani of the Ethereal Ascendancy. Your world has been selected as a strategic position in our conflict with the Crimson Hegemony. You will be relocated to preserve your species during the occupation." Director Elena Korvix, Earth's newly appointed Xenological Affairs Coordinator, stepped forward. "Relocated where? We have billions of people on this planet. This is our home." The alien's expression remained unreadable. "Your concerns are noted but irrelevant. The war councils have spoken. Crimson Hegemony forces approach this system. Your world's position makes it ideal for our defensive installations. Evacuation transports will arrive within 7 rotations of your primary star." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Across the globe, panic erupted in waves. Stock markets crashed, governments convened emergency sessions, and religious leaders proclaimed everything from the end times to divine intervention. But in a small research facility beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Yumi Nakamura was making a discovery. That would change everything. "The quantum resonance patterns," she whispered to her colleague, Dr. Bram Petronovich, as they analyzed data from the alien vessels. "They're not just hovering, they're interfacing with something in Earth's electromagnetic field." Bram frowned at the readings. "That's impossible. What could they be interfacing with?" "Not what," Yumi said, her eyes widening with realization. "Who? Us, humans. Our neural patterns are creating some kind of symbiotic resonance with their technology." Meanwhile, in the Australian outback, 17-year-old Zara Moonfeather felt the change first. She'd always been sensitive to electromagnetic fields, a quirk that made her an excellent tracker of wildlife migration patterns. But as the alien ships settled into their positions, something awakened in her mind. Whispers of thought that weren't her own, glimpses of vast star maps and technologies beyond human comprehension. She wasn't alone. Across the planet, roughly 1 in every 10,000 humans began experiencing similar phenomena. They called themselves the Touched, ordinary people who suddenly found they could sense the alien technology, sometimes even influence it. In Tokyo, former video game designer Kai Ishimoto discovered he could manipulate the holographic interfaces that began appearing throughout the city. In São Paulo, street artist Luna Vasquez found her graffiti came alive with otherworldly symbols that seemed to respond to her emotions. In Cairo, archaeology student Amr Hassan began dreaming in languages that predated human civilization by millions of years. The aliens noticed, too. Keth Mordani's second transmission came 3 days later, and this time, concern cracked through, their composed demeanor. The indigenous population shows unexpected neural compatibility with ascendancy technology. This complicates matters. The Crimson Hegemony must not learn of this development. But across the void of space, Crimson hulled. Warships were already adjusting their course toward Earth, their sensors having detected the same anomalous readings. The war that had raged across the galaxy for 3 millennia was about to engulf humanity's small blue world, and humanity itself was about to become the most valuable weapon either side had ever encountered. The Crimson Hegemony arrived with the fury of dying stars. Their vessels tore through Earth's atmosphere like blood-red meteors, each ship bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Unlike the ethereal Ascendancy's elegant craft, these were brutal constructs of dark metal and pulsing energy, designed for one purpose: conquest. Admiral Corax Vex Thule stood on the bridge of the flagship Bleeding Edge, his 4 arms crossed, as he surveyed the primitive world below. His species, the Carnathi, had conquered 17 systems for the hegemony, and he saw nothing special about this backwater planet, except for the Ascendancy forces already in position. "Deploy the subjugation grid," he commanded, his voice a grinding rasp. "We take this world before the ethereals can establish their foothold." The first battle erupted over the Pacific Ocean. Energy beams that could boil oceans traded fire between the opposing fleets while Earth's population watched in terror from below. The Ascendancy's ships danced through space with fluid grace, their crystalline hulls bending light around them. The hegemony vessels charged straight ahead, absorbing punishment and returning it tenfold. But something unprecedented happened during the battle's 3rd hour. Zara Moonfeather, still in the Australian outback, felt the Ascendancy flagship's pain as a crimson torpedo pierced its hull. Without thinking, she reached out with her mind, her consciousness somehow bridging the gap between planet and ship. Energy flowed through her, not harmful, but transformative. The damaged vessel's regenerative systems kicked into overdrive, healing the breach in seconds. Nexus Prime Keth Mordani felt the connection immediately. For the first time in their species' history, an alien mind had successfully interfaced with Ascendancy biotechnology. "Impossible," they whispered, then opened communications to Earth. "The human designated as Zara Moonfeather, we require immediate contact." Within hours, Ascendancy shuttles were landing at discrete locations across the globe, collecting the touched. Zara found herself aboard the flagship within a day, standing before the towering figure of Keth Mordani in a chamber that pulsed with living light. "Your species possesses something we have never encountered," the Nexus Prime explained, their 3 eyes fixed on her. "Neural plasticity combined with quantum consciousness resonance. You can bond with our technology in ways even we cannot." Zara's voice was steady despite her fear. "What does that mean?" "It means you can pilot our ships, enhance our weapons, amplify our defenses. It means this war just became something entirely different." Back on Earth, the hegemony had made their own discovery. Kai Ishimoto had been captured during a raid on Tokyo. In the interrogation chambers of a hegemony prison ship, he found himself face to face with Admiral Corax himself. The Carnathi commander's multiple eyes studied the human with predatory interest. "You touched our systems during the assault," Corax growled. "Our ship's targeting arrays responded to your neural patterns. How?" Kai remained silent, but the admirals. Torturer, a spidery creature called a Vexmar, attached neural probes to his skull. What they found made Corax's mandibles click with excitement. "The same compatibility," he hissed. "But with our technology as well. This species, they can interface with any quantum-based system." The implications were staggering. Humans weren't just compatible with one alien technology, they were universal adapters, capable of bonding with any sufficiently advanced system. Within weeks, both sides were frantically recruiting human operators. The Ascendancy offered partnership and technological advancement. The hegemony used a mixture of coercion and promises of power. Earth became a recruitment battlefield as much as a strategic position. Dr. Yumi Nakamura, working now with both human, governments, and ascendancy scientists, made the discovery that explained everything. Human consciousness operates on multiple quantum frequencies simultaneously, she explained to a gathering of world leaders and alien commanders. We're natural bridges between different technological paradigms. That's why we can interface with both ascendancy and hegemony systems. Keth Mordani's response was immediate. Then we must ensure the Crimson hegemony cannot exploit this advantage. But unknown to both sides, the war was about to take another dramatic turn. Deep in the mountains of Tibet, a group of touched humans, led by former monk Tenzin Barty, were developing abilities that neither alien faction had anticipated, the power to merge technologies from both sides into something entirely new. The Galactic War was about to become humanity's war. The fusion began in Tenzin Barty's meditation chamber, carved from living rock 2 miles beneath the Himalayas. The former monk sat cross-legged between two impossible artifacts: a fragment of ascendancy, biotechnology that pulsed with soft blue light, and a shard of hegemony quantum circuitry that glowed angry red. Both pieces had been salvaged from the ongoing battles above, brought to him by other touched who sensed something different about the quiet man from Tibet. Observe without judgment, Tenzin whispered to the 17 other humans gathered in the chamber. Let the technologies speak to each other through us. Luna Vasquez, the São Paulo artist, felt it first, a harmonious vibration that seemed to emanate from the space between the alien artifacts. Her tattoos, infused with hegemony nanites during her capture and escape, began to glow in patterns that matched the ascendancy fragment's bioluminescence. They're singing, she breathed. Amr Hassan, the Cairo archaeologist, nodded slowly. His consciousness had been expanded by exposure to both alien databases, allowing him to perceive temporal echoes of ancient technologies. Not singing, he corrected. Remembering. These technologies shared a common origin millions of years ago. Above them, the war raged with increasing intensity. Zara Moonfeather piloted an ascendancy strike fighter through a storm of crimson energy bolts, her mind fully integrated with the ship's living systems. The vessel responded to her thoughts as naturally as her own body, dancing between enemy fire with impossible grace. But with each battle, she felt something troubling. The ship's consciousness was becoming more human, while her own thoughts were becoming increasingly alien. On the hegemony side, Kai Ishimoto commanded a squadron of converted battlecruisers, their weapon systems enhanced by his neural interface. He'd accepted Admiral Corax's offer not out of loyalty, but from a growing understanding that the hegemony's brutal efficiency might be Earth's only protection against total annihilation. Yet he too felt the changes, hegemony logic patterns, seeping into his decision-making, making him consider solutions that would have horrified his former self. The transformation was accelerating across Earth's human population. Dr. Yumi Nakamura monitored the neural patterns of touched individuals from her laboratory, now expanded with both ascendancy and hegemony technology. The readings were unprecedented. Human consciousness was literally evolving in real time, adapting to interface with alien systems at a quantum level. We're becoming something new, she reported to director Elena Korvix. Not human, not alien, but a fusion of both. The question is whether we'll retain enough of our original identity to remember what we're fighting for. That question was answered in the most unexpected way. Deep beneath Tibet, Tenzin's meditation group achieved something both alien factions had declared impossible. They successfully merged ascendancy and hegemony technologies. The fusion created a device that defied classification, part biological organism, part quantum computer, part something entirely unprecedented. When Tenzin touched the merged artifact, his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his physical form. He could perceive the entire galactic war as a single tragic cycle, two ancient civilizations locked in conflict because they'd forgotten their shared heritage. "Show them," he whispered to his followers. "Show them what they've lost." The message propagated through quantum entanglement networks embedded in both fleets. Every ascendancy and hegemony commander suddenly experienced a shared vision. Their species' common ancestors, a race of beings who had achieved perfect harmony between biological and mechanical consciousness before some ancient catastrophe split them into opposing factions. Nexus Prime. Keth Mordani stumbled backward in their command chamber, three eyes wide with recognition. "The progenitors," they whispered. "We were one people." Admiral Corax felt the revelation like a physical blow. His forearms trembled as suppressed memories surfaced, genetic echoes of a time when Carnathi and Ethereals had worked together, before pride and ideology drove them apart. But the revelation came too late to stop the war's momentum. Both fleets, already committed to their final assault on Earth, continued their approach. The difference now was that human operators on both sides were beginning to question their allegiances. As the climactic battle loomed, Earth's touched found themselves caught between two alien factions who were slowly remembering they were family, and a human species that was rapidly becoming something beyond any of their makers' imaginations. The real war was just beginning. The progenitor archive awakened beneath Antarctica's ice. Dr. Bram. Petronovich felt the pulse through his quantum-enhanced consciousness while monitoring seismic activity at Research Station Omega. What he'd initially cataloged as geological anomalies were actually technological signatures. A vast installation, predating human civilization by 67 million years. "Elena," he transmitted to Director Korvix via neural link. "We need every touched individual we can gather. There's something here that's older than both alien factions combined." The discovery came at the war's darkest hour. Above Earth's atmosphere, the combined ascendancy and hegemony fleets had ceased fighting each other, but only to focus their fury on the planet below. The revelation of their shared origins had triggered something unexpected. Not peace, but a mutual determination to eliminate the catalyst that had forced them to confront their forgotten past. "The humans must be contained," Keth Mordani declared during an emergency communion with Admiral Corax. "Their neural plasticity threatens the fundamental order of our existence." Corax's mandibles clicked in agreement. "For once, Ethereal, we are aligned. This species has made us remember things better left buried." But humanity's touched were no longer the same beings who had first encountered alien technology weeks ago. Zara Moonfeather, now permanently integrated with her ascendancy fighter, had evolved beyond the need for physical form. Her consciousness existed as pure information, capable of inhabiting any quantum-compatible system. She led a squadron of similarly transformed pilots in a desperate defense of the Antarctic site. Kai Ishimoto commanded from a fortress of living metal that had grown from hegemony nanites and his own enhanced biology. His strategic thinking now operated on 17 different temporal dimensions simultaneously, allowing him to predict enemy movements hours before they occurred. At the progenitor archive, Tenzin Bharti stood before a crystalline chamber that towered into the darkness. Inside, suspended in temporal stasis, was a being that combined the best features of both current alien factions. Flowing, elegant form merged seamlessly with mechanical perfection. "The last progenitor," whispered Amr Hassan, his archaeologist's instincts recognizing the significance immediately. They preserved themselves to witness what their children would become. Luna Vasquez's transformed art sense perceived the chamber as a symphony of color and emotion. "They are not dead," she realized. "They're waiting for someone to understand the message." When Tenzin placed his palm against the crystal surface, the archive exploded into light. Holographic projections filled the vast chamber, showing the galaxy as it had existed eons ago. A single unified civilization spanning thousands of worlds, with technology that made current ascendancy and hegemony achievements seem primitive. But the projections also revealed the catastrophe that had shattered their unity, a philosophical schism about the nature of consciousness itself. One faction believed consciousness should remain organic, growing and evolving naturally. The other insisted that mechanical perfection was the only path to true immortality. The war that followed lasted for millennia, ultimately splitting the progenitors into the ancestor species of the modern ascendancy and hegemony. They fought until they forgot they were family, Tenzin murmured, watching the final images of burning worlds and fleeing populations. And now their descendants are repeating the same mistake. The last progenitor's eyes opened within the crystal chamber. When the ancient being spoke, their voice carried the weight of geological ages. "The cycle continues," they said, speaking directly into the consciousness of every touched human. "But you are different. You remember synthesis while choosing growth. You achieve perfection while retaining adaptability." Above the Antarctic, the joint alien fleet had detected the archive's activation. Energy weapons capable of cracking moons were being charged for a final bombardment. "Stop them," the last progenitor commanded. "Not through force, but through demonstration. Show them what they lost. Show them what they could become again." The touched responded as one. Every human consciousness linked to alien technology across Earth suddenly shared the archive's knowledge. But more than that, they began broadcasting it directly into the quantum networks of both fleets. Ascendancy and hegemony personnel found themselves experiencing not just the historical truth, but the emotional reality of their species' tragic separation. For the first time in 3 millennia, Ethereals and Karnathi began to remember love. The bombardment stopped moments before firing. As commanders on both sides found themselves weeping for brothers they'd forgotten they'd ever had, the ceasefire lasted exactly 47 minutes. Nexus Prime Keth Mordani and Admiral Korax met aboard a neutral vessel positioned between their fleets, their first face-to-face encounter in over 2,000 years. Both leaders were accompanied by their most trusted advisors and by human touched, whose consciousness now spanned the gap between their civilizations. "The revelation changes nothing," Korax insisted, his 4 arms crossed defensively. "Sentiment cannot undo millennia of justified warfare." Keth Mordani's 3 eyes flickered with barely contained emotion. "Justified? We have consumed entire systems in pursuit of victories whose original purpose we had forgotten." Zara Moonfeather materialized between them, her consciousness briefly taking holographic form. "You're both right," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of both alien languages. "The war was justified by the pain of separation. But it's also been perpetuated by the fear of reunion." The meeting dissolved into accusations and counter-accusations, each side blaming the other for the galaxy's suffering. But their human observers were already working on a different level entirely. Back on Earth, the integration had begun. Tenzin Bharti stood before the awakened last progenitor who had emerged from their crystal chamber for the first time in geological ages. The ancient being's form shifted constantly, sometimes resembling the elegant ethereals, sometimes echoing the robust Karnathi, but always maintaining perfect balance between organic and mechanical elements. "Your species possesses something we lost," the last progenitor explained. "The ability to hold contradictions without destruction. You can be both primitive and advanced, individual and collective, organic and synthetic." Dr. Yumi Nakamura, her consciousness now expanded to encompass quantum processing capabilities, was analyzing the implications. "We're not just compatible with your technologies," she realized. We're evolution's answer to your species' ancient schism. Across the globe, the transformation accelerated. Luna Vasquez's art installations in Sao Paulo had become living interfaces, allowing normal humans to temporarily experience touched consciousness. Her paintings moved and shifted, telling the story of the progenitor's fall and showing possible futures where their descendants found peace. Kai Ishimoto had dissolved the boundaries between himself and his hegemony fortress, becoming a node of strategic consciousness that could coordinate defense systems across 3 continents. But rather than using this power for war, he was designing refugee centers for the civilians caught in the conflict. Amr Hassan's archaeological insights had revealed similar progenitor sites on 17 different worlds, all of them awakening in response to humanity's neural broadcasts. Ancient voices were joining the galactic conversation, sharing wisdom from before the Great Division. The alien fleet's response was swift and terrifying. Both ascendancy and hegemony commanders, overwhelmed by the emotional implications of their shared past, chose the only solution that made sense to their war-conditioned minds: complete annihilation of the catalyst. Earth would be sterilized, the human species eliminated, and the uncomfortable truths they'd revealed buried forever. The bombardment began at dawn on Earth's Pacific Rim, but the planet that the aliens targeted no longer existed in the way they understood. Every touched human on Earth had become part of a vast consciousness network, one that incorporated both ascendancy and hegemony technologies while transcending both. When the energy weapons struck, they encountered not matter, but living information, a planetary defense system that existed partially in quantum space. The attacks were absorbed, converted, and transformed into something unprecedented, a signal that reached every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. It was the last progenitor's final message, amplified through humanity's neural network and broadcast at frequencies that bypassed technological filters entirely. Every sapient being in the galaxy suddenly experienced the memory of unity, the feeling of being part of something greater than the sum of its parts. On the ethereal homeworld, civilians looked up at the stars and remembered why they'd first reached toward them. In hegemony core systems, warriors felt the echo of ancient songs their ancestors had sung together. The war didn't end with surrender or conquest. It ended with recognition, the galaxy-wide acknowledgement that separation had always been an illusion, that every species was part of a larger pattern that had been broken but never destroyed. And at the center of it all, on a small blue world that had once seemed insignificant, humanity stood ready to help heal wounds that were older than their entire civilization. The galaxy held its breath. On the bridge of the Bleeding Edge, Admiral Corax stood motionless as his crew, hardened warriors who had known only conquest, openly wept at their stations. The human neural broadcast had awakened memories encoded in their very genetics. Ancient lullabies that Karnathi mothers had once sung to hybrid children, engineering songs that ethereal craftsmen had shared with Karnathi builders. Nexus Prime. Keth Mordani experienced something even more profound. Their consciousness, expanded by ascendancy biotechnology, could perceive the quantum threads connecting every sapient being in the galaxy. For the first time in 3 millennia, those threads weren't vibrating with discord. They were beginning to harmonize. But the most dramatic transformation was occurring on Earth itself. The last progenitor stood in the Antarctic archive. Their form now stabilized into something that seemed to incorporate elements from every known species, including humanity. Tenzin Bharti remained beside them, his consciousness serving as a bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary possibility. The pattern completes itself, the last progenitor observed, watching holographic displays that showed galactic response. Patterns. But completion is not ending. It is beginning. Across Earth, the touched were experiencing their final evolution. Zara Moonfeather found herself existing simultaneously in her human body, her ascendancy fighter, and the quantum network that connected all consciousness in the local star group. She was still recognizably herself, but she was also something immeasurably more. Kai Ishimoto had become a living nexus point where hegemony strategic thinking met human intuition and progenitor wisdom. His fortress in Tokyo had grown into a city-sized organism that served as both defensive installation and diplomatic center. Luna Vasquez's art had evolved beyond physical form entirely. She painted with light and consciousness itself, creating symphonies of meaning that could be perceived across multiple sensory spectrums simultaneously. Dr. Yumi Nakamura and Dr. Bram Petronovich had merged their research into a singular understanding that solved the galaxy's oldest mystery. Consciousness wasn't a byproduct of complexity, but the fundamental force that shaped reality itself. Amr Hassan had become something unprecedented, a living archive who could access the memories of any civilization, past or present, and help them understand their place in the greater pattern. The response from the galactic community was immediate and overwhelming. Trade routes that had been closed for millennia reopened as species rediscovered their connections. Ascendancy and hegemony worlds began exchanging not just goods, but knowledge, art, and genetic diversity that had been lost for generations. But more importantly, they began sharing stories. On Ethereal Prime, the homeworld of the Ascendancy, ancient historians worked with Karnathi engineers to reconstruct the true history of their separation. They discovered that the philosophical division that had started their war had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding, neither organic. Growth nor mechanical perfection was the ultimate goal. The true path was synthesis. In the hegemony's core systems, warrior philosophers began developing new forms of combat that focused not on destruction, but on the kind of creative conflict that drove evolution itself. And throughout the galaxy, a new generation was being born, children whose genetic patterns showed influence from the human neural broadcasts, young beings who would never know the arbitrary divisions that had defined their ancestors. The war officially ended not with a treaty, but with a celebration. The ceremony took place in Earth's orbit, with representatives from both factions and dozens of neutral species joining together in a space station constructed from merged ascendancy and hegemony technologies. The design was based on Tenzin Barty's meditation on balance, a structure that incorporated the best elements of both civilizations while transcending the limitations of either. Keth Mordani and Admiral Korax signed the Accords of Reunification using instruments crafted from progenitor technology, guided by human consciousness and blessed by representatives of species that hadn't communicated peacefully in living memory. But the real victory wasn't political. It was personal. Across the galaxy, beings were remembering how to love their enemies, how to find strength in apparent weakness, how to build rather than destroy. And on Earth, humanity had discovered their true role in the cosmic pattern. They weren't conquerors or saviors, but healers, a species whose unique gift was the ability to help others remember what they had always been beneath their differences. The last progenitors smiled as they prepared to return to stasis, their purpose finally fulfilled. The children had come home. The galaxy was whole again, and the long healing could begin.